Following the outbreak of the Pacific War in late December of 1941, but the United States and Japan had shifted their focus to the Pacific Islands. This small group of islands became a strategic battleground in which the United States and Japan would fight over for the next 3 years. In May of 1942, Japanese Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto sought to draw the U.S. Pacific Fleet into a battle where he could overwhelm and destroy it. To accomplish this, he planned an invasion of Midway Island, which would provide a base for attacking Hawaii. Following the strategic defeat at the Battle of Coral Sea, the commander of the Japanese Combined Fleet devised a plan to draw out the remaining ships of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. To accomplish this, he planned to invade the island of Midway, 1,300 miles northwest of the Hawaiian Islands. A key to Pearl Harbor's defense, Yamamoto knew that the Americans would send their remaining aircraft carriers, the USS Enterprise and the USS Hornet, to protect the island. Leaving the U.S. to only have 2 carriers operational, he sailed with 4, plus a large fleet of battleships and cruisers. The leader of the U.S. naval forces at this time was Admiral Chester Nimitz. With his forces tied up with only 2 operational aircraft carriers, needed an extra advantage. The United States was going to take control. Enter Naval Officer Joseph Rochefort, a high-ranking crypto-analyst and codebreaker for the Navy. At Pearl Harbor, Admiral Nimitz was made aware of the impending attack on Midway by his team of codebreakers led by Commander Rochefort. Having successfully broken the Japanese JN-25 naval code, he was able to provide an outline of the Japanese attack as well as the forces that were going to be involved. To meet this new and emerging threat that the Japanese were throwing at the Americans, Admiral Nimitz dispatched the carriers of the USS Enterprise and the USS Hornet to Midway, hoping to surprise the Japanese at their own ambush. However, the Admiral had a trick up his sleeve. The USS Yorktown, an aircraft carrier severely damaged at the Battle of Coral Sea, was actually repairable. The Japanese had believed that the ship had been sunk, which caused them to underestimate the American forces. After the miracle repairs had been made, the Yorktown began its journey to Midway to aid the USS Enterprise and Hornet in the battle and to surprise the Japanese fleet. The Battle of Midway took place between June 4th and June 7th of 1942. At 4:30 a.m. on June 4th, Vice Admiral Chiuchi Nagama, commanding the Japanese carriers, launched 108 planes to attack Midway Island, as well as 7 scouts to locate the American fleet. Brushing aside the island's small force of fighters, the Japanese planes pounded Midway's installations. While returning to the carriers, the strike leaders recommended a second attack. In response, Nagama ordered his reserve aircraft, which had been armed with torpedoes, to be rearmed with bombs. After this process had been commenced, a scout plane from the cruiser Tone reported locating the American fleet. Upon receiving this news, Nagama reversed his rearmament order. As a result, the hangar decks of the Japanese carriers were littered with bombs, torpedoes, and fuel lines as ground crews scrambled to re-equip the Japanese aircraft. The first squadrons from the U.S. arrived from the Hornet and the Enterprise. When attacking at a low level, they failed to score any direct hits and suffered heavy casualties. Though the planes from the Enterprise and the Hornet didn't do any damage, their attack, coupled with the late arrival of fighters from the Yorktown, pulled the Japanese air patrol out of position, leaving their entire fleet vulnerable. At 10:22 a.m., American dive bombers approaching from the southwest and the northeast struck the aircraft carriers Kaga, Soryu, and Akagi. In less than 6 minutes, they reduced these Japanese aircraft carriers to burning wrecks. In response, the remaining Japanese aircraft carrier, known as the Hiryu, launched a counterstrike. Arriving in 2 different waves, its planes twice disabled the Yorktown. However, later that afternoon, an American dive bomber group located it and sank the Japanese carrier, completing the victory for the Americans. The following days of the Battle of Midway, American aircraft sunk the Japanese cruiser Mikuma, while the Japanese submarines torpedoed and sank the disabled American Yorktown. The consequences of the Battle of Midway for the Japanese were huge. In less than a week, they had lost 4 vital aircraft carriers that were considered to be a necessity for victory in the Pacific. Whereas the Americans could replace the USS Yorktown, the Japanese would have found it very difficult to replace one carrier, let alone 4 of them. It caused a major shift in the war and was the catalyst to the eventual U.S. Pacific victory.